Thanks very much, Matt. Yeah, we're all set for the start of the free practice session here, Saturday morning, all set to get underway, and a little unfair on you there, John. Of course, you raced here at the Austria ring, and you took your first Grand Prix victory here, 1976.
Yes, I did, Ben, in 1976, great year for me, but, well, what have I got to do? I mean, I get it every way I move with Matt. Whatever, it's a great circuit, the A1 ring now, going to provide us with two 45-minute sessions, and we're going to see both teams or both tyre companies working very hard to determine finally what they will choose. Ferrari have said they're very happy with their tyre choice, and they will be working, no doubt, in the first part of the session on a little bit more race work, whereas the Michelin runners will be trying to do a lot more race work, determine that tyre, and then in the second 45-minute session, when they've made that determination, go out and do a simulated qualifying run.
Well, here we are then, into the pit garages already on this bright Saturday morning in Austria, up in the mountains, and a chance to see how everybody gets on this morning. Yesterday, let's just remind you, Ferrari were fastest in the free practice sessions. Schumacher headed the first one, and then Rubens Barrichello ended up with the fastest time overall by just 0.03 of a second from his teammate. Michael Schumacher has never won here at the A1 ring, and in fact he's been out-qualified by his teammates on two previous occasions. It's not something that tends to happen to Michael very often, but he has been out-qualified by both Rubens and by Eddie Irvine a few years ago. Well, perhaps it'll be his chance this time, and Eddie Irvine, winner here in 1999 after Michael Schumacher broke his leg. Eddie came through and won that race here at the A1 ring in 1999, and in fact he's just been speaking a moment ago to Nick Damon.
Eddie Irvine, seemed things a bit better for Jaguar yesterday. Certainly Pedro, I think, was 6th and you were 11th, much better than normal.
Yeah, Friday's Friday, we keep saying it. We're not going to be there today, but I think we'll probably be a little bit better than we thought we were going to be here, but it's not going to be much.
Is it because his track is perhaps a bit more simple, it doesn't rely so much on the aero side of the car?
There's a bit of that, there's not so many bumps, so that sort of helps us.
And when are we going to see the big improvements from the team?
Don't know, the guys are working like crazy back at the factory with the wind tunnel to try and sort out the problems. You know, we do have a problem with this car. We're trying to fix that and add efficiency and downforce, so I don't know when they're going to sort it, but we just got to work as hard as we can.
Eddie, thanks, best luck.
So a little bit of a down on Eddie Irvine, I would have to say. Not a particularly bubbly interview this morning from Eddie, but of course he hasn't got a lot to be bubbly about at the moment.
No, and I have to say I thought Eddie might have made a bit more effort in the interview than he did. It seemed like it was just, not another interview, boring. I mean, part of his responsibility as being a driver for a manufacturer like Jaguar is to, put on a slightly more uplifting front, but Eddie, of course, very truthful, and sometimes truth does hurt, and in the case of Jaguar they've got a long way to go. They are talking about Silverstone when they expect to see the beginnings of the benefits of their new wind tunnel in Bicester, and of course they've just been joined by two further members from other teams, one from McLaren, one from Arrows, so the whole process does take time, not just in terms of the development that goes on in the wind tunnel, but once you've determined what you want to go, which direction you feel you should be going in, then you've got to start laying out those pieces, and it takes time to make them, then got to be tested before they become a regular feature on the race car.
Austrian support here this weekend. Niki Lauda, of course, the only Austrian Grand Prix driver to have actually won in Austria. That was back in 1984, and it was a restarted race. There used to be quite a lot of restarted races here at the Austria ring. Of course, 1987, they had 3 starts, and that was the last Grand Prix that was held on that original Austria ring track before coming back in 1997 to this revised 2.7-mile circuit.
Yes, the original Austria ring, I mean, a great circuit, a very high-speed circuit, and they're part of the problem also, because it was quite a long circuit by today's standards. There were probably fewer laps per Grand Prix, with bearing in mind that most Grand Prix today are around about 190 to 195 miles. So if you're only making maybe 45 laps instead of making the 71 that we will be doing here on Sunday, it commercially doesn't make quite as much sense. And Formula 1 is above all business, and the drivers and teams are looking hard and long at how they can find innovative ways to bring in new sponsorship, new investment. Having races on long circuits isn't the way to go.
So Rubens Barrichello, fastest yesterday in his Ferrari F2002. and looking hopefully for a chance to beat Michael Schumacher in qualifying today. He's come so close in the last 2 Grand Prix, but will this be his opportunity? He's always gone well here in qualifying, and he had a string of 5th place starts when he was driving for Stewart. So always seems to like this track. The nature of it suits his style perhaps, and he'll be able to challenge Michael Schumacher. But will he be able to take pole today after being so close? There's Alan McNish. We heard he had a good run yesterday, ended up 5th fastest in the Toyota, and fairly satisfied, not expecting of course a performance like that in qualifying, but maybe they can knock of the top 10 as we've seen a couple of times this season.
Yes, Toyota feel that having had the sort of the wake-up call of going to Imola and then to Barcelona, 2 technical circuits, coming here in Austria, a very smooth circuit, a circuit which flatters, let's say, that the qualities of the Toyota. Very, very good horsepower, good straight line speed, that's one of the prerequisites, and of course doesn't place a premium on other aspects of the car. As we listen to Montoya and the team, a quick initial in-out lap.
Onboard radio with the teams, and we'll be listening. Basic setup work going on at the moment, just to confirm that all the checks are made and that the cars have been rebuilt overnight. Of course, they've been rebuilt with their qualifying engines on board now. For example, in the case of Sauber, who have a revised engine spec this weekend for qualifying, those cars will now have those engines on board.
And I just wonder, both Williams drivers got out of their cars, and I would have expected them not to have done that. But clearly, if they are running an engine which got a limited amount of mileage, which is what qualifying engines tend to do, well, maybe the team are restricting the drivers on the number of laps that they are expecting to carry out. And I was quite happy to see everybody pretty much go out when the circuit opened up, and to see the 2 Williams drivers come in and having completed just their out installation lap and then get out of their cars. I thought, that's a bit strange. Why are they doing that?
Well, maybe a few adjustments to be made, maybe all part of the plan for Williams. There's David Coulthard, who's got one of the best records of anybody here at the A1 ring, winner last year, 4 times runner-up, and he's led at some point in every Grand Prix that's been held on this revised circuit. There is Juan Pablo Montoya out of the car then, as little work going on around it, and Rubens Barrichello just about to come out on a brand new set of tyres. But we know this Austrian Grand Prix has seen some great history. Peter, I think you've got a comment to make on that.
Oh yes, just looking at Takuma Sato there, chatting to him yesterday after practice. He was pretty happy with the way things went yesterday. He had a slight off, but nothing like the offs we've seen recently, and he is doing something very interesting next weekend. In order to try to learn the circuit for Monaco, of course you can't test at Monaco, he's going to race a 1967-68 Lotus 49 in historic Grand Prix. I say race, he's going to drive it, I'm sure, but I think that's a very enterprising thing, and I think it's great that Eddie Jordan is allowing him to do that, and more Grand Prix drivers should be encouraged to do one-off events like this. And chatting to Rubens Barrichello yesterday, and said you should have a run in the 61 Shark-nosed replica Ferrari, and Rubens' eyes lit up and said, yeah, I'm going to work on it, and I'll try and do that as well. So I think full marks to Sato for wanting to do that.
Yeah, it's good news, and a good way for him to learn the track, never having been to Monaco before. And a big historic meeting coming up next weekend in Monaco. The weekend before, of course, the Grand Prix goes there itself.
Yes, and a very popular weekend it is with enthusiasts, particularly those that like historic racing cars, though I'm maybe not as enthusiastic as Peter is about letting Takuma Sato go and drive in Monte Carlo in a car which was basically just a fuel tank with a seat in the middle of it. And with the unforgiving nature of the Monaco circuit, I'd rather, in my opinion, having watched Takuma Sato drive in 5 Grand Prix so far this year, this is the 6th one of the season, the thought of him going to Monte Carlo in a car like that, he's a racer, he's not going to go out and poodle around, he's going to go out and nail the throttle. Now, that performance, of course, is a million miles away from where his current Jordan Honda would be, but nonetheless it'll give him some indication of the rhythm of the circuit. But what it will not give him is a feeling for the road, for the circuit, because the current Formula 1 cars are an incredibly stiff run device, whereas the Grand Prix cars, or back in the late 60s, had suspension, had long suspension. The cars rode along it almost like a magic carpet. So what he's going to learn is beyond me, and also the downside of it, I think, is greater than the benefits, but that's not my judgment, fortunately. And Eddie Jordan in particular, seems content to let Takuma Sato use that opportunity, principally to get a feel for what he's going to have to contend with in 2 weeks from this weekend.
Well, we're looking at a car with Bridgestone tyres, and Bridgestone ran very particularly in the first session yesterday, and not so quick in the end on the second session. Michelin seemed to come back at them, but Nick Damon's caught up with the Bridgestone man to find out how things have been going for them.
Yugoslav from Bridgestone. It seemed very close between you and your competitors yesterday. How do you see it?
Oh yeah, we are very, very pleased, and our team is working very well, and I think our package is now very succeed.
It was noticeable that the Bridgestone runners had a lot of camber on their front wheels, an awful lot. Why is that?
I think this is between our tires and chassis are matching. Then I think put on the camber is better than less cambers.
Now, the drivers obviously have tried both compounds for you. Has one compound emerged as a favourite of everyone yet?
I think each team is going to choose their favourite compounds, but I don't know which ones they are going to choose.
Thank you very much.
So Hiroshi Yasukawa of Bridgestone giving us the look going on with their battle, or the competition within the teams, and also the decision making within the teams that has to go on to decide the compound. We seem to gather from the notes that Ferrari were fairly happy to go with a particular compound. The Michelin runners, like Williams here, still working on their decision. A fairly earnest discussion going on there between Patrick Head and Ralf Schumacher before the start of this, during this first free practice session.
Yes, the Williams team, both drivers out of the car. We saw that literally. They completed the first lap and came in and jumped out of the car, but also Hiroshi was quite inscrutable when he was asked the direct question, and went into sort of, let's say, corporate garble and saying, each team will make their own decision, and well, we know that. But what we want to know is what that decision is. And of course, he is not in a position that is privileged information between the team and the tyre company, and it is not incumbent on the tyre company to tell us and therefore the world what choice Ferrari, Sauber, Arrow, Gordon have made.
Well, Montoya's looking reasonably happy, isn't he, at the moment? Just talking to Mario Tyson of BMW before coming back out in this free practice session. Montoya qualified second here last year, actually led for a while, led some 15 laps, but he had an incident with Michael Schumacher that was up at the Remus curve that dropped him down to 7th position, and he ended up retiring with a hydraulic problem in the end. So that's his only experience of the A1 ring compared to this man, Jacques Villeneuve. And Villeneuve, of course, a former winner around this track when he was driving for the Williams team himself. Now, Minardi are on track. There's Mark Webber going through the first corner, the Castrol curve. Alex Young is also out there. And Alex talking yesterday, relieved that they've got the power steering working on these cars. Peter, I think you've got some more on that.
That's right, yes. Alex, without in any way wanting to criticise him, he's probably the least strong of the Grand Prix drivers on the grid. He's a slightly built lad, and he's really appreciating the power steering that Minardi have finally given him. And I think that reflected really in his performance yesterday. Didn't look too bad at all, and he looked very good through the first corner here, I thought.
Interesting to note, yeah, he was actually a fraction quicker, wasn't he, yesterday than Mark Webber, which is unusual.
Yes, it is. I don't think we should read too much into that. As they say, Friday's Friday. But I think from Alex's point of view, it looks like he's in tune with the music, and he might do something reasonably impressive today. Hopefully.
Hopefully. We'll keep an eye on him. Of course, failed to qualify this year for the San Marino Grand Prix, and failed to start, like Mark Webber last time out in Barcelona, because of the cars being withdrawn. But, John, we're looking at Michael Schumacher, and already using that extra piece of curb. We saw people really going out wide at that first corner yesterday, and Michael himself was falling off the road a few times at this corner, the Remus curve. He said afterwards, that's nothing unusual, you have to expect that at this track.
Yes, an interesting sort of view of Michael's psychology, and he said, we make mistakes, it's the nature of this circuit, but we're now some 11 minutes into this session, and already Michael getting up to speed. He's quickest in that first sector. He's on his first full flying lap. Rubens Barrichello, of course, in the Ferrari garage, watching every movement that Michael Schumacher makes. He comes up very shortly to that second intermediate time, and again, not surprisingly, fastest by almost a second. 1.7 seconds overall, but a second on that individual sector, and expected to pick up a further, the best part of a second in the final one, and quickest lap to mark. We have a 1:16.4. Well, Michael Schumacher will probably be down somewhere around the 14s or maybe even in the 13s by the time he crosses the line to complete his first flying lap. 1:13.4 wasn't a million miles away.
Well, of course, it's not actually in free practice. This doesn't count towards the grid, but a 1:13.4, the fastest time of the day so far. And you can just see beautiful conditions, blue sky. We had quite a lot of cloud around yesterday during free practice, but it's a stunning morning here in Austria at one of the most picturesque tracks on the Formula One calendar. And well, we know there's this revised engine in the back of the Sauber today, Ferrari developments, meaning that they've got a few more horsepower to play with. And for Nick Heidfeld and Felipe Massa, they'll be looking forward to that. Nick unfortunately had an electrical problem yesterday, which rather dented his chances of setting a quick time later on in the session, enjoying his 25th birthday. And today I'm sure that he'll be hoping to try and match that 6th place qualifying effort that he put in here last year driving for Sauber.
Yes, and sitting in the back of the Sauber garage was a Ferrari member of the Ferrari team, and maybe they just sent one of their engineers down to keep an eye on that installation and the first initial laps that Sauber are going to enjoy as we enjoy that ride on board with Michael through the A1 curve. Not as aggressive as we've seen Kimi Raikkonen through there. Again, of an improvement, 1:12.6. I suspect Michael might do one more flying lap, then call it a day for this particular run. Temperature's down on what we saw yesterday. Of course, it's much earlier, just after 9 o'clock in the morning in the A1 ring, where we started at 11 o'clock for Friday's practice. Much earlier wake-up call for everybody on Saturday morning.
So Giancarlo Fisichella, former pole sitter here at the A1 ring back in 1998 in the damp conditions, driving for Benetton. But it's been a season of disappointment for him so far in the Jordan Honda. He's only finished one race so far, and that was the Malaysian Grand Prix, despite the accidents with Takuma Sato. That's the only finish he's had all season long. Hopefully they've got those hydraulic problems under control, and Fisichella will be able to make it to the end of this weekend's race. And there we are back now with Michael Schumacher heading through the Gerhard Berger curve, the quick right-hand sweep, and up towards the Jochen Rindt curve. 135 miles an hour, 4th gear through here, pulling some 4G, and a quick dab on the brakes down to 3rd for this last corner that brings them round to complete the lap.
Well, he was some 3/10 up on his previous lap, and again further improvement, 6/10, picked up another just over 3/10 of a second in that final sector. Michael Schumacher quickest in every sector, purple, purple and purple. And now whether he continues with a further lap, well, I suspect he may come in. Yet Ferrari could choose to stay out and do a longer run. Sometimes they might want to gain information. As we now go on board Juan Pablo Montoya, who's venturing out. This is his first sequence of flying laps. Montoya climbs up this long uphill, climb all the way up to the Gossa, up to this Remus corner, I should say. Hard on the brakes. Corner it caused lots of I'm going to say once again, so easy to overbrake, outbrake yourself, got it wrong, and of course then the momentum is lost. He's going to sort of go through the motions, complete this lap. Probably lost maybe half a second, 3/4 of a second by that little misjudgment.
Well, you can see the rev counter on the left. The engine works hard around this track. The last 2 sections we've just seen, they're at full throttle for over 10 seconds on each of those straights. That's a long, long way, and it's up to about 70% full throttle around this track. So the engine has to work for its living here at the BMW motor. But look at this, good split times, and showing the fact that Montoya is going to be right up there challenging Michael Schumacher's times in this free practice session. Let's just watch him around the final part of the lap here.
Go, position 4.
Montoya now second fastest. McLaren keeping an eye on things. Ron Dennis in the foreground, Adrian Newey in the back of the garage. Renault didn't have such a good day yesterday, however. Peter, I think you might have a bit more on that for us.
Well, yes, Ben, I think this is a bit of an acid test this morning for Renault, because as Flavio Briatore told us yesterday, they were a bit lost on setup. It's not the first time that's happened to this team. When it was, of course, known Benetton 99-2000, had a quick car, but it was quite inconsistent from one circuit to the next. And I thought it was interesting yesterday on a day which was not a bad one. for the Michelin runners that Renault were struggling. So important today that they find the problem there. They also have that other unsolved mystery of the spare car, or what used to be Jarno Trulli's race car in the Spanish Grand Prix. Both drivers could not get it up to speed at Barcelona, and they don't know the reason for that. The car is identical to the other two, and race teams don't like situations. They don't like being lost. Of course, nobody knows all the answers. But at the moment, Renault's struggling a bit, and this morning, very important that they start to find their way.
Good point, thanks Peter. Yes, we know that Jarno Trulli jumped out of his car into the spare and found it performed better, and Button tried Trulli's race car, also didn't like it at all. So, as you say, tricky one for the team. Watching Montoya at the moment on track.
All the changes you did yesterday for the CC, go park on them. Fine, copy that.
Now, I didn't quite understand what he said there, but...
It's not letting the car accelerate though. It's turning in too fast, slow.
I think he's telling us he's turning into the slow speed corners is too fast, which is something you don't often hear a driver complaining about. They have watched Montoya. He's been fiddling on some of the buttons, which I think are to do with the diff.
Wait, forward.
Sounded to me a little bit like he's basically saying that the changes made from yesterday haven't worked. But that's all part of...
Are we stopping in the box and pulling away again? Stop in the box. Stop in the box.
Montoya coming in now to make some other adjustments, being asked to stop in the box, practice effectively where he'll be stopping in the race for the all-important refuelling and tyre change. But it sounds to me as though that they're going to be going back a little bit on setup perhaps, as we're just taking a little look at a replay of the view, watching the same pictures down there in the pit garage that we are watching on F1 Digital. And there is Alan McNish on track now. You know, there's a very nice comment from Gustav Brunner in the press conference yesterday when talking about the Toyota program so far this year. He said, well, the drivers, Alan McNish and Mika Salo, are the solid diamonds of the team, he said. Like the engine, he did admit, but he said that the chassis is lacking. But a nice comment there from Gustav Brunner about McNish and Salo.
Yes, and the consolidation of a team is always very good to see. As we look into the Renault team, Jenson Button sitting in his car. Michael Schumacher has not come in. He's continuing to run around, so he's on a longer run, choosing to find out just what the car and the tyres are going to do, maybe over an 8 to 10 lap run. He's completed 10 laps now. Of course, he went out having done 3 in and out laps, so this is probably he's on his 7th flying lap as such. Oh, but it's quite a long run for Ferrari and Michael Schumacher. Just worth watching that to see how his times compare. That last lap he did was way off what he would ordinarily do. He may have made him an error, he may have backed off, he may have decided that something needed attention in the cockpit, but on a longish run, and Ferrari doing homework for the race very clearly at this stage of the practice session.
So Mika Salo, 11th fastest currently. Let's just quickly look at the list. It's the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher ahead of the Williams of Ralph, then it's Barrichello, Montoya, Panis in 5th ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen in 6th fastest position so far. Then it's Fisichella, McNish, Sato, Irvine, Mika Salo 11th, as we've just seen, and then Jacques Villeneuve in 12th. Villeneuve missed out on some of the running yesterday. They were a bit late making chassis changes to the car. We saw him standing around, his helmet on. Wasn't time to get in the car until quite late in the second free practice session, so I think he felt as though he missed some valuable setup time.
Yeah, but the car looked awful, I thought. I mean, we saw him coming out of the Gerhard Berger, the car flicking it around like it was a go-kart rather than a Formula 1 car, and that just, to me, smacked of overdriving and frustration. And the team really have got to get a handle on Jacques Villeneuve's approach, and he's got a somewhat idiosyncratic idea, but set up from time to time. Whereas teammate Olivier Panis, right now Panis is 7th quickest, and in fact Panis was 8th quickest at the end of Friday's practice, so Panis much better, more comfortable with the setup or whatever the workload he's doing. But look at Heidfeld, I mean, you can't get more off the curve. Now we go up to his teammate Massa up at the top, and this is in through the Remus curve, but Nick Heidfeld has got it way off the track.
Yeah, that was pretty committed stuff from Nick Heidfeld. He's 5th fastest. By the way, Frensen's just gone 2nd fastest on a 1:11.651. Good effort from Frentzen.
And that's actually quicker than he achieved after 2 sessions on Friday afternoon. But the man who's really out there going quickly is Ruben Barrichello. Barrichello currently 4th quickest, but fastest through that first sector. And once again putting the heat on his teammate. Schumacher, of course, on a much longer run. He's now completed 11 laps. Clearly the Ferrari team have sent Michael out with a lot of fuel on board to get some information. So again, just looking at Felipe Massa, ran so wide, ran over the curb onto that bit of painted tarmac. On one lap I thought if he gets it any further than that, we go back to Rubens Barrichello ought to go quickest of all on this lap, and yes, he does, 1:10.902.
Again, look at the difference between himself and Michael Schumacher, just a few hundredths of a second. But that's been the story so far here this weekend, and it sets up a great battle in qualifying, and perhaps the Williams can also be a part of that battle this time. Looking at a replay here of Nick Heidfeld, this was when he went really wide out of turn one. That's the Castrol curve. Need good speed out of there, John, because he got such a long straight coming up, but he was very wide, wasn't he?
Well, we're looking to see the previous lap he did a maybe in fact it was that lap. We're just catching up on the times on the data screen. Of course, you can see that at home and follow all these times that we use when we're giving you our commentaries. And you go back to Rubens Barrichello on this lap, not particularly quick. Now, he may have done that one flying blinding lap. He's going to come back into the pits, or may pick it up again as he comes up to the A1 corner, the final corner, but it looks like he's going to go back into the pits and have a talk to the engineers.
So Barrichello going well. Here's Jenson Button, and we heard from Peter that they need to get their sums right today in terms of getting that car to handle correctly. They weren't really on the pace as we might have expected yesterday, but I'm sure they've been doing their homework overnight, and we'll get an idea perhaps of just how well the car will be going. Michael Schumacher's pushed back into the pits. Barrichello's still going round, but I think he's probably heading back in himself in a moment. We're seeing Jenson Button here, but Peter Winter, I believe, has a little information for us just outside the Williams garage.
Yes, just outside Juan Pablo Montoya's garage, where they're readying for his next run. Patrick Head's been standing quite sternly by the side of the car. Doesn't mean much. Patrick always looks quite stern. But an eventful night last night for Juan Pablo. He drove to Graz to pick up his parents, I believe. And needless to say, was stopped by the local constabulary. I think he was going 1 or 2 kilometres over the speed limit, nothing too excessive. But the punchline is that when he was asked to show his driver's licence, of course, Juan Pablo showed his Colombian driver's licence. And where there's normally a picture of your face, he's got a picture of himself and Connie in an embrace, which the policeman thought was quite funny. And fined him €35, which I thought was a bit of a result for Juan Pablo. He was quite pleased about that. Bearing in mind, I think over the winter, Ralf Schumacher had a sort of threatened prison sentence of doing something like 100 kilometres per hour, not over the speed limit. So nice one there for Juan Pablo. And on a more serious note, Juan Pablo, I think, feels it's sort of round one to him, because Spanish Grand Prix was the first time that he and Ralf have run closely together in race conditions this year. And although Ralf will say, yeah, it was an unforced error and he missed an apex, had a bit of understeer, Juan Pablo says quite definitely that was the nearest he'd run to Ralf all race, and he felt he pushed Ralf into a mistake. And there was that slight gesture of the clenched fist as he went past Ralf in Spain. So a lot of needle between these two guys. They're both professional, but they don't really talk, they don't socialise. It's a healthy fight between the two.
Thank you very much, Peter. Yes, well, that needle will certainly keep things alive here during the season. Now we're Enrique Bernoldi on track, and I believe that we can speak to Arrow's team boss, Tom Walkinshaw. Tom, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can, thank you.
Despite the noise echoing off the grandstands there. Another impressive performance yesterday, and once again from Enrique Bernoldi this morning, third fastest. Is this just confirming the pace that we saw in Barcelona?
Yeah, I think so. You know, we're just trying to build it all the time, and yeah, the kid's doing well this weekend. He's been on the pace all weekend.
Tom, clearly you've got a really quick car, and this is a circuit that suits your car's strengths, good top speed, and you've got a good balance. What can you expect in qualifying?
Well, John, we hope to be in the top 10. You know, it's not easy once they start bolting in qualifying engines, but, you know, I think what we've seen so far, there's a race trim, the car is very, very competitive.
Tom, yesterday Heinz-Harald Frentzen had that off, which damaged the underside of the car. The guys seemed to do a pretty good job to get him back out. It all looked a bit rushed down there in the pit garage.
Yeah, we didn't pick it up the first time. He actually cracked the under tray the first time he went off, and so he did a run on new tyres with a broken under tray, which caused him to spin again, and then we noticed it. But anyway, they turned it around very quickly.
Great. Well, thanks very much for joining us this morning, Tom, and good luck with qualifying this afternoon.
Well, just looking down through the times, and David Coulthard suddenly for the first time pops up into the top 3 as we listen to Jensen.
As you can see with the amount of laps it takes to get the tyres in. I even pushed hard on the air lap also, so that is one little problem, but hopefully when the temperature comes up that will be helped. The balance feels quite good when the tyres work. High speed, turn 5. Car's slightly understeering, turn 6 car's quite neutral. And turn 8, I've got more front end there than I did.
Oh, that's some good stuff there coming from Jensen Button's radio, but we're riding with David Coulthard, and David puts in a quicker lap now, moves up to 3rd fastest, just 0.3 of a second off the Ferrari pace.
And certainly David is not out there just doing a long, gentle run to get information. He's pushing very, very hard indeed. You can see just how wide he ran over the exit out of that Castrol turn. That's turn 1 after the start-finish line. Now watch him here. Remus gets the car on nice, and now we go to Kimi Räikkönen.
He's gone fastest. Great lap there from Kimi Räikkönen with purple middle sector, so fastest of all through the middle sector, and a pretty committed exit out of turn 1 there. 1:10.890 from Kimi Räikkönen, and the Flying Finn, this year's version, is once again looking very rapid indeed. Of course, this has been a McLaren track in recent years. Can it be that today we can see them get back onto the pace that we might expect?
And again, improving another almost 0.2 of a second at that first sector. Both McLaren's, Coulthard and Räikkönen, look very good on the entry into the Remus corner, much better than we've seen from some other teams. Both drivers not appearing to overdrive into it, but to get a good turn in and then getting good drive and traction off that corner. Very neat, tidy workmanlike. There's a bit of oversteer just for Räikkönen at the back end, drift away, shaved a couple of thousandths off his current improved time. Now accelerates up over this hill, then drops down through the Jochen Rindt curve.
Coulthard's gone fastest, but Räikkönen looks to be getting it back again, because Coulthard's just done a 1:10.795, and Räikkönen all over the place as he tries to beat that. He was up on the split. Is this going to be a better lap? Yes, it is. So Kimi Räikkönen and David Coulthard, 1-2 now for McLaren Mercedes, with some just under 17 minutes to go of this first session of free practice, and that's a good effort, but we'll have to wait and see whether that corresponds to good qualifying times later on today. At the moment, they've only just gone to about the same pace as they were doing in yesterday's free practice.
Räikkönen really got held up. Takuma Sato had come out of the pit lane. You could see him ahead of him. He saw the McLaren coming, as we know. I'll go back to David Coulthard, but Räikkönen's run of laps slightly interrupted, and you see what David Coulthard, personal best in that first sector, nothing better than that in the second. And in fact, Coulthard is going into the pits.
Yeah, he's backed off in that second sector, and so he comes into the pits. The two of them looking very evenly matched here around the A1 ring this morning. Ralf Schumacher then in the Williams BMW coming through 1.135 seconds slower. I think the McLarens were probably out on a fresh set of tyres, making the most of those new tyres as a bit more rubber has gone down onto the track again, and I think we'll see the times improving throughout the course of this morning. And then what we will wait to see is whether people put on a new set of tyres at the end of the second session of free practice in a real qualifying simulated run, and that will give us some more idea. Look at Michael Schumacher.
Well, Michael Schumacher, if he maintains this pace, is going to be the first driver today to beat the fastest lap of yesterday, which was Rubens Barrichello, a 1:10.549. And Kimi Räikkönen got pretty close to it this morning, but Michael Schumacher with that 0.8 improvement on Räikkönen's personal best so far. This should be a 1:9, and it is 1:9.636. That exceeds, I think, qualifying time from last year.
Not quite. It's a 1:9.562 was what he did for pole last year, so he's almost there, John, and we're only in the early stages of free practice.
And when they pump the fuel out and they go for it in earnest, again, track temperatures and ambient temperatures quite low this morning. Good for engine, but not necessarily good for tyre temperatures. We heard Jensen Button a moment or two ago saying that when the tyre temperature comes up, the balance is very good, and that's really been the problem. I think Michelin runners have been suffering. They've got to get the tyre temperature up. While these tyres are preheated in the garages before the car goes out, and there you see Benoli's car with the tyre blankets over the tyres. Nevertheless, when you go out in your initial lap, there is a drop off in that temperature, and it's only by running that the tyre temperature comes back up again, and for Bridgestone it seems to come more quickly than it does for Michelin.
Schumacher once again on a pretty rapid lap here, faster first sector for him, but middle sector about the same. So I wonder if this will lead to improvement. Of course, maybe he's had the best out of those Bridgestone tyres, having done one flying lap already, but it is a faster lap, a 1:9.4.99, and it looks as though the Bridgestone's capable of providing 2 rapid laps on this slightly shorter track, remember, than we see for most of the Grand Prix circuits, and it's also a low grip, low abrasiveness on the track as well. So the tyre company's bringing their softest compounds of the season really to this track, despite the fact that they're likely to run a one-stop race. Felipe Massa waiting to come out now.
Yes, of course, that long one-stop race offers teams the chance to do either an early pit stop, late pit stop, as we saw with David Coulthard and McLaren last year. And if you've got the ability to run quickly and go deep into the race, then you're going to be in very strong shape when it comes to making that pit stop. And what enabled Coulthard to win the Grand Prix was his showing of about a 6.5 or 7 second stop, and it put him in position to get ahead of both the Ferraris. And I mean, good strategy that race from McLaren, and a great drive from Coulthard.
More experiments with the rear wing on the Ferraris. We've seen this fairly consistently throughout our coverage on Digital F1, diving inside the pit garages and watching Ferrari try some different elements to the rear wing on this car, and it seems to be very effective experimentation. They're nearly always setting the pace. Michael Schumacher, once again, a little slower on that lap, as the tyres have now done 3 fast laps. And we turn our attention from one rapid German to another. Heinz-Harald Frentzen on track in the Arrows.
And what's been, I think, very impressive is the pace of Enrique Bernoldi, Frentzen's less experienced teammate, who's pretty much matched Frentzen all the way through. And currently, in fact, is quicker than Frentzen. Frentzen is down in 11th place. He just dropped 1 place in the space of saying it. And Bernoldi is still in 5th place. Bernoldi in 11.1 and Frentzen in 11.6, so half a second difference between these two. And it's good for a team like Arrows to have 2 drivers, a young up-and-coming driver, a more established Grand Prix winner. One's pushing the other along, but again operating at an entirely different level compared to the top 3 teams. And Arrows is one of those teams that really are looking for huge investment to enable them to do more testing, to be able to get more from Ford for this engine, and just build the team, expand the team, and cover more of the bases.
Now through the quick left-handers on the inside section of the track, looking down over the hill, and through the second of those left-handers, and now through the quick right-hand kink, climbing back uphill. And this is a good time for Heinz-Harald Frentzen. This will move him up the order. Let's just watch him through these last 2 right-handers, pulling very high G-forces through these 2.
I expect to see a time. Yeah, he's currently down in 14th. He just dropped. Now he's up to 5th. So a substantial improvement, and has put him ahead by about 0.2 of a second of his teammates. As Tom Walkinshaw sits in the garage, or the pit lane, in fact, looks impassively at the screen, just willing the screen to see the times tumble. As we go down to one of his colleagues, and Eddie Jordan's face, sort of telling a story that, when is it going to come right for this team? And Eddie Jordan very, very unhappy that the reliability and the performance has been power so far this season.
Now watching Nick Heidfeld once again in the Sauber, currently 7th fastest. One thing to watch for at this track, being a slightly shorter track, and one that certainly rewards engine power very effectively. Let's just see what this lap is. So he goes 4th fastest, 1:10.896 for Nick Heidfeld. We will tend to see the cars in team formation a little bit on the grid this afternoon. It's likely that you'll see the teammates fairly evenly matched, separated by just hundredths of a second. And it's a question of which team gets their sums right as to whether they end up ahead of everybody else.
Olivier Panis just ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Shouldn't affect Frentzen's time. Maybe a small improvement, and no, it's not. In fact, it's a slower time by about 1.5 of a second. He's backed off, and he's on his way in. So having done a couple of laps where he's found improvement, it's down back to his teammate Enrique Bernoldi, who dirt tracks the Arrows out to let the back end drift out to check the front, check the steer. Bernoldi not showing any particular signs of improvement in this particular run. Probably a set of tyres now that's done more laps, and the freshness of those tyres has gone away.
So Enrique Bernoldi, yes, no improvement in time for him currently, but still great run for the team. Great look underneath the Arrows at that twin keel layout at the front. Tries to channel the air around the front wing, through the front suspension and beneath the car to provide as much downforce as possible.
So we saw Bernoldi just overtaking Rubens Barrichello, who's just gone back out on track. Barrichello had been quick as he's drifted down into 5th place. As we watch Mika Salo, who has improved as well, up to 11th, and his teammate Alan McNish is in 12th.
Well, Mika Salo finished 6th here when he raced for Sauber in 2000. Had some good runs with Sauber during that season. And talking of Sauber, Peter Windsor's just outside their pit garage in pit lane. Peter, can you hear me?
Sauber, very... Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, great. Yeah, pattern developing with Sauber. Very nice attention to detail. They seem never, wherever possible, to run both cars on the circuit at the same time, which of course gives Sauber one less car out there that may cause trouble or indeed may give them turbulence. When the two Saubers are running close together in the race in the Spanish Grand Prix, it was very noticeable that Massa's front and rear wings had that vibration we heard the engineers talking about earlier, and that was purely from the turbulence of the car, of Heidfeld's car in front. So why have two cars out together when you can leave one in the garage and one on the circuit? That's the measure of the organisation at Sauber at the moment. Also interesting is they push Nick cars in there to see that Sauber, I think, are the only team now which don't have their display on the steering wheel. It's still on the dash, and I think that possibly is a legacy of the steering wheel failure they had last year. They've designed the steering wheel perhaps to be a little bit stronger without losing any weight and taken out that display function from the wheel, and it's now on the dash. Again, nice attention to detail from Sauber.
Yeah, interesting point, and we're watching Felipe Massa on track at the moment, in fact, as you say, with Nick in the pits, and he looks as though he's pushing pretty hard. Let's watch on board here through the last corner.
The car, oh, he was wide again, but he looked very darty. Front end of the car looked like it was stuck to the ground. The back was being dragged around. And Felipe Massa, well, he's still in 14th place, no improvement in time. But certainly exciting ride. But Michael Schumacher, fastest first sector, as we see the reigning and potential future world champion. I don't think he's going to, well, he should say, maybe it could be a slightly improved time. He's done a 1:09.499. Let's see if he can shave another 10th or even a 1,000th off that. No, he doesn't.
No, but that's a good time. If he's not on a fresh set of tyres, that's a very impressive lap time again from Schumacher. The track's still getting quicker and quicker as the rubber goes down. That shot of Massa, that's one of the images of the season for me so far. That camera, which is in the curb on the exit of the final corner. Look, this is from the outside view as he came across the curb and got it sideways. Almost running over the camera, but that was just fantastic. What an image. Felipe Massa, look at him getting crossed up coming out of that last bend.
Well, we saw him do that yesterday, and I thought, Ian, don't go in. That is no man's land. That is territory you want to stay away from. Well, I don't think he heard me, and he still kept his foot in it, and, well, it's just irrepressible young Brazilian as his teammate sits much more relaxed, calm, Nick Heidfeld. Nick went to Stuttgart over the last week and picked up a brand new toy, a nice new GT2 Porsche, over 463 bhp, and he says, I'm going to drive my car to each of the European Grand Prix. I hope he realises that the overseas ones he can't drive it to.
Well, he's enjoying himself, having a good season at the moment, and Michael Schumacher goes faster again.
That's a big chunk of time, 1:09.001. Barrichello up to second, some half a second behind. Because now Barrichello's gone fastest in that first sector. Barrichello responding. I mean, a stunning lap from Michael Schumacher, who is currently on a run of laps, not simply just going out on a brand new tyre. So Schumacher just once again emphasising the superiority that Ferrari has, as we watch Barrichello as he drops down into that Gossa curve and into the faster part of this A1 ring circuit.
Yes, he's had a faster first sector time himself, actually. Let's watch the second one. Not quite as good, so he's half a second down on the intermediate at that point. There's a couple of different speed traps around the track as well, and at the moment Michael Schumacher has the top speed at the speed trap at 309 kilometers per hour. It's 193 miles per hour.
Yes, Barrichello had set a fastest first sector time. He's now abandoned that lap and come into it. Interesting from Ferrari. They're not, you can see P2 indicating Rubens' time, the top of those two times. Let's look at those bridge zones. It looks perfect. That tyre colour, that sort of shade of grey that indicates that the tyre really is doing its job. I had concern yesterday about the front tyres, and we saw Ross Brawn looking particularly at the right front. It was the way that the tyre was shearing, but those seem to have cleaned up, and it's now the Michelin tyre. We looked into the Williams pits and had a look at some of the fronts on those, and I think in Ralph's car it looked very, very pleasant look on the surface of the tyre, but those tyres are about as good as they're going to get. And again, the right front in particular looking absolutely lovely.
Felipe Massa has gone fourth fastest, and in fact he's on another pretty good lap, although the middle sector he's slowed down a fraction. Had a very good first sector time. Looking at Niki Lauda, and he's looking for a new sponsor for his cap, apparently. He not having that deal anymore, so he's prepared to talk to people, he was saying yesterday in the press conference, but as yet he hasn't sorted out a new sponsor for his cap.
Don't come cheap, I can assure you of that. But nevertheless, Niki, a unique character in the history and the world of Formula One racing. No doubt somebody will pick up the cap and run with it. We had a brief glimpse at Eddie Jordan looking in the garage of his two runners, and Fisichella just going back out. Takuma Sato currently out on track, and both Jordans down 15th and 16th, and that is, well, maybe not reflective of the potential in qualifying, but certainly not where Eddie would like to be, even in an unofficial session.
Tyres looking good on that car too. Of
Michael both Ferraris, the tyres looking absolutely mint. And you'd almost buy a pair of second-hand tyres off that Ferrari, they're looking that good.
Well, he's fastest overall, the two Ferraris, 1 and 2. It's Kimi Raikkonen, Felipe Massa 3rd and 4th, then Coulthard, Panis, Heidfeld 7th, Frentzen 8th, Bernaldi 9th, and Montoya currently 10th fastest. Jenson Button 11th, and the man we saw being pushed back in a moment ago, Jarno Trulli, down in 12th place ahead of the two Toyotas, Salo and McNish. Then it's Fisichella and Sato. So as we were talking about earlier on, a lot of the teams lining up together in the standings at the moment, and that's something to watch for later on today as well.
One team that's not doing that currently, and again Ralf Schumacher had some problems on Friday. Ralf Schumacher currently way down in 17th place. Teammate Montoya, well, 10th place, not where you expect Williams. Williams tend to not worry particularly because they've got a very specific list of things they like to work through. Nevertheless, I think from a driver's point of view, there's always this sort of feeling of that when you see your competitors doing times like the two Ferraris are, McLaren now as well in the middle 10s, but I mean some 1.5 seconds away from mine. I mean that's 1.5 seconds Raikkonen in 3rd place, slower than Michael Schumacher. This time will be an improvement for Raikkonen. He's only 7/10ths away, so even if he loses another 0.2 of a second, he's going to come within a second, but that's still not enough to improve his position. It'll improve his time as Raikkonen gets way wide on the exit of the A1 corner.
Yeah, and that didn't help his time at all, did it, John? In fact, I think he had a couple of cars not too far ahead, but it might have just distracted him a little bit. On board here with come to an end.
But Frentzen has actually gone 4th quickest in that final lap. Felipe Massa had been 4th quickest. Frentzen popped in that fast lap, 10.764, as the flag came out.
So everyone's been past that checkered flag, and Frentzen putting in another flying lap there, a 10.764, and you can see that 5th place Felipe Massa was just 1/1000th of a second slower than that during the session, in which he completed some 11 laps, not as many as some, and in fact Michael Schumacher completed 24 laps during that session.
I think, interestingly, that we didn't see very much of the Williams team out, and I suspect what they're doing is saving miles on their engines, because if they've got these performance upgrades that they promised us here for this Grand Prix, clearly they're for qualifying only, and they're just trying to keep the mileage down to a minimum. And I would have expected to see Montoya and Ralf Schumacher further up, bearing in mind the speeds that we've seen from Kimi Räikkönen. Räikkönen's still 1.5 seconds away from Michael Schumacher. That's just, 1.5 years is probably as much used to him.
Yeah, look at that. In the top 10 at the moment, neither of the Williams BMWs do feature. The McLaren Mercedes fastest of the Michelin users, 3rd and 6th for Coulthard, Button up there as well, but Montoya and Ralf Schumacher somewhat further down the list, and tends to be more of the blues for Michelin on the 2nd page of the timesheets. The 2 Jaguars down in 19th and 20th.
This is pretty much a mirror of what we saw on Friday, because the first part of Friday was very much the first page, and the times were virtually dominated by Bridgestone. And the second page was, of course, dominated by Michelin. We're again seeing that occur this morning. Probably as much as anything else temperature related, though I think in the case of Williams, they are definitely holding back. They're restricting the drivers on the number of laps to ensure that they're not putting too many miles on their engines.
So everybody enjoying this first 45-minute session, and we've just got under half an hour until they're back out on track. And while we've got a bit of a pause, Matt has a chance to catch up with boss of the BAR team, David Richards.
Yes, David, so far not so bad for one of your drivers, not so good for the other. Can you explain the disparity?
Well, I wish we could explain it. No, I think it's just getting a balance on the car. The track here seems to be quite difficult to get the front tyres to work, and I think most of the teams are having the same sort of problem as we have. Olivier seems to have got a very good balance, but by contrast, Jacques having trouble just getting that set up right.
David, it's John Watson. We watched Jacques yesterday, and at one point, particularly coming through the Berger curves, it looked like he was just over-driving the car so much. Now, I accept the car is not working for him, but is it just something as simple as that he's just trying too hard and almost murdering that car, murdering the tyres?
It could be just that, John. I don't know. We'll have a debrief after this session, have a chat with him and see if we can solve it in time for qualifying.
David, would you say that your plans for reorganising BAR are going according to schedule?
Yes, I believe we're on target at the moment. The morale's very high inside the team. Everyone's sort of looking to the future. We're making progress one small step at a time, and that's the key to it. It's no great sort of revolutions. Nothing's going to happen overnight, but no, everyone's feeling in a very positive frame of mind.
Let's hope it continues. David, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have a look at the highlights and the glorious Sound of Music Sunshine from Austria of that 3rd session.